HarperCollins presents The Shadow in the Glass by Jja Harwood, read by Sophie Roberts. Part 1. If anyone caught her, Eleanor would be dismissed on the spot. The house clicked and creaked as it settled into sleep, the heat of the last days of August quietly slipping into the night. Eleanor was the only one awake. On silent feet, she was as insubstantial as a flame. She could drift past cold fireplaces and dust sheets looming like glaciers, and all she would leave behind was the faintest stirring in the air. Candlelight shimmered on the walls as she crept into the library. The dark spines of the books were rows of windows waiting for the shutters to be pulled back. Open one, and she would know the secrets of Ottoman palaces. Open another, and she would gaze across deserts. Granborough House would fade away. Eleanor smiled. Some things were worth risking dismissal for, especially with the master out of the house for the evening. Eleanor sat down her candle and surveyed her subjects. Damp equatorial rainforests steaming in the heat. Versailles glittering in the dark like an earthbound star. Verona, Juliet on her balcony, sighing into the darkness. It was a perfect night for poetry. She could stretch out her legs and whisper sonnets into the slow, hot silence. But she would cry, and Mrs. Fielding would be able to tell the next morning. Better to keep her face blank, in case the housekeeper grew curious. Eleanor locked the door, slipping the library key back up her sleeve. She'd stolen the key from Mrs. Pembroke's housekeeping chatelaine. Even though the mistress of the house had been dead for more than 3 years, shame still crawled under Eleanor's skin when she went through Mrs. Pembroke's things. Not that Mrs. Pembroke would have minded. She had spent the last few months of her life propped up on pillows, telling Eleanor how to care for everything she would inherit from Mrs. Pembroke's will. The weight of the key against Eleanor's forearm felt like shackles. Mrs. Pembroke never would have wanted Eleanor to creep around the house like a thief just for something to read. The lady of the house had not wanted Eleanor to be a housemaid at all. Versailles, Verona, perhaps even the rainforest, these were all places Eleanor might have visited if only Mrs. Pembroke had lived. A lump crawled into Eleanor's throat. Mrs. Pembroke had been planning to take her on a tour of Europe when Eleanor was old enough to enter society. Suddenly it seemed cruel to have so many travelogues spread out in front of her when she'd once been so close to seeing the places all these men had written of. Eleanor gave herself a little shake. She told herself not to get upset. She lifted the fairy ring off the shelves and felt better the moment it was in her hand. Her own fingerprints from years ago marked the table of contents, smaller, of course, than they were now. The corner of the back cover was fraying slightly from all the time she'd plucked at it as she read. Settling into her favourite chair with that book in her hands, the lump in her throat melted away. At 17, she knew she ought to have grown out of such things, but it was difficult to set aside a world where trees grew delicate gold and silver branches and strange creatures lurked in cool, clear water. She lost herself on narrow paths, twisting through dark woods, yearned to spin straw into gold, and envied the 12 brothers who had been changed into swans. It seemed like a fine thing to be a clean white bird that might fly anywhere it liked. She put the book back when the clock struck midnight, making sure to replace it exactly where she found it. The chimes were quiet, but the sound dropped through to the pit of Eleanor's stomach like a leaden weight. An old memory struggled to the surface of her thoughts. She was 9 years old and curled into a ball, back pressed against the leg of an iron bed as a cheaper, harsher clock tolled midnight, but she shook it off. It wouldn't do to think of her own mother now. She'd make herself upset again. Somewhere outside, a hansom cab rattled over the cobblestones. She flinched, heart pounding, and almost knocked her candle over. Mr. Pembroke was supposed to be dining at his club.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?